Well, hello, everybody. It is May 19th, and I know people are excited about the governor's new rulings that we have as of this coming Friday or Saturday, with restaurants being open and small groups of people being able to gather, and what that potentially means for the church. Please pay attention to emails. We're going to hopefully make a decision sooner rather than later about when we can get together as a church, but be praying for the leadership. But today we're going to dive into the Old Testament like we do on Tuesdays, and I want to look at 2 Kings chapter 2. Now this is an interesting story and an interesting account, and it's interesting for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons that I was thinking about it is because of my new quarantine haircut. I've been getting some flack from people about how on certain videos, and especially when I preach on Sundays, that it looks like I'm bald, and people have been having fun with that. And so I want to read you an account that is generally a favorite among all youth pastors, at least. So in 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 and 24, it says, "From there, Elisha went up to Bethel. As he walked along the road, some boys came out of the town and jeered at him. 'Get out of here, Baldy,' they said. 'Get out of here, Baldy.' He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 boys." Now, you can imagine why youth pastors in particular would find this text encouraging. I mean, it kind of seems to imply, if you mock your elders, especially those whose hairline is receding, that, be careful, because God may send a bear out of the woods to come and maul you. Now, although that's not really the point of the text, it does bring comfort to those of us whose hairline is, fleeing south. But I want us to walk through this and just to note, I guess, some of the points. So it starts from there. Elisha went up to Bethel. Now, this is a huge transition in the history of Israel, because Elisha was kind of the disciple of the prophet Elijah. Elijah is the one who was up on Mount Carmel. Elisha is a great, considered to be the greatest prophet in the history of Israel, and his leaving, he was taken up to heaven in a fiery chariot, and his leaving is described to us earlier in this chapter, was a huge transition and a huge change for the people of Israel. And so there's this period where Elijah and Elisha go out, and God sends them to several different cities, and kind of the point is being laid of connecting these two men together, kind of saying, this is going to be my successor. And so where they are currently, or where Elisha is coming from, is Jericho, where he's kind of retracing his steps that he went with Elisha, and God is bringing him about. Now in Jericho, where he's coming from, the water was bad, and so he ends up basically fixing the water problem and making the water healthy again in a miraculous way. And so there's this kind of constant picturing of him as the replacement, as the new chief prophet of God, spokesman for God in the nation of Israel. And so it says, as he walked along the road, some boys came out of the town and jeered at him. Now, the last time, and remember, this is only a couple days prior to this, he was walking along this road with Elisha. And prophets came out of the town and were basically drawing this connection between him and his leader, and how Elisha was going to be taken up to heaven. And this time, though, things are very different. This time, prophets don't come out of the town. This time, some boys, some youths came out. Now, the term that's used to describe them here, this could include, it can include those all the way up to 30. And so most likely this isn't those, young teens. This is those who are in their probably mid to early 20s. But the point that needs to be kind of reminded, or that we need to remind ourselves of here, is that this is a culture where to honor your elders was really important. You honor your elders always. And then you honor above them, you honor those who are in authority, those, whether it be governmental authority, which was less serious, or it be spiritual authority, those who were priests and those who were prophets. You were to honor. You honored them because to dishonor them would be to dishonor their God. And so out of fear and reverence for God, you would honor them. And so this idea that they come out and they jeered at him, which literally means they mocked him. They were mocking him as the new prophet. And they say, "Get out of here, Baldy." Now, this is a weird thing to say. Literally, to get out of here literally means to go up. And the idea is interesting because it's the same phrase that's used in chapter 1 when Elisha was sent to the king, and God says, "Go up to him." And the picture there is, I want you to do what I'm telling you to do. Go do what I'm telling you. And here they're coming down and they're not calling on him to submit to God's authority, but to theirs. And it also could be a little play on words in the fact of knowing that Elisha has been taken up, and they're saying, "You know what, go up where he went. We don't want you here." Either way, it's a mocking of him that is meant kind of professionally. We don't value you. We don't respect your authority. We're not going to listen to you. And then they begin to mock him personally. They called him Baldy. Now, it's rude. Let me just say, it's rude to go to someone and say you're bald. All right? It's rude. So keep that in mind. But this here is a personal mocking of him. So not only are they mocking him kind of professionally as a prophet of God, but they're also making it personal and mocking him personally. We don't respect what you do, the God you stand for, and we don't respect you as a person. And so this is intense. And this is a large gathering of people. So we know that there's at least 42 of them, but most likely there was more of them than that. So we have this group of 40 to 50 to 60 young people who are mocking Elisha as he's just walking. And then look at verse 24. He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Now I want you to notice that he uses the name of God to call down this curse. In other words, he's not seeking to defend himself as much as he's seeking to defend God. They are challenging and being critical of him as a servant of God, as an ambassador of God, as a prophet of God. And so he calls down this curse on them, similar to what we see in chapter 1 with the king going after his predecessor, going after Elijah, and he sends a general and 50 of his soldiers down, and they say, "Hey, come on," and he says, "You know what, if I'm really a prophet of the Lord, may fire come down from heaven and consume you all." And this happens twice. 50 men and their leader come down and they command Elisha to do what they want. Don't listen to God, do what we tell you to do. And he says, "Well, if I'm a prophet of the Lord, if I'm a servant of the Lord, then may fire come down and consume you all." And it does. Twice. 2 different sets of people. So 102 people burned to a crisp. And the third one finally comes in humility. But here this idea is this drawing of himself to God, that I am going to be able to speak for God and God's power rests upon me. And the reaction that comes is not because of him as much as it is because of God. And then it says, "Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys." Now again, literally it means 42 of their number. So most likely, again, this isn't all of them. This is just a large portion of them that get attacked by 2, literally, the text says female bears. Now, there's this self-justifying kind of smile there when you hear about, younger people acting immaturely and not honoring their elders, kind of getting slapped around a little bit. Like there's some kind of there's some comfort in that, or even just comfort in knowing that someone got punished for doing something wrong. There's some sense of kind of comfort in that. But what I want us to get from this, not only is it funny, it's humorous for us, but I want us to get the fact that we are not in the situation that Elijah was in. And none of us are Elijah. Elijah was in a unique situation where he was taking over as the speaker for God for the people of Israel. And he needed to establish who he was and the role he was going to play. And so God chose to do it in a variety of ways, most of them through blessing the people, like by using Elisha to fix their water supply in Jericho. And then in Bethel, it was to maul a bunch of kids who were mocking him and dishonoring him. So it's both positive and negative kind of reinforcement of what his role was. But we need to remember that when we're wronged, which you are in this world, Jesus said, believers, you will have trials and troubles. You will be mistreated. If they mistreated our Lord, why would they not mistreat his servants? So even though we're going to get mistreated for our faith, we need to follow the example of Christ. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 23, it says, when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. Now that's speaking about Jesus. So when Jesus was being insulted on the cross, he didn't retaliate. When he was suffered, when he was being persecuted and hurt physically, he didn't threaten them back. He entrusted himself to him who judges justly. In other words, he trusted God to do what is just and right. He trusted God to pay back the wickedness that people were doing appropriately. And friends, I want to remind you that when we're hurt, we have a tendency to hurt in response, to hurt back. And this isn't just with non-believers. I know that I have a tendency, even with my wife, when I feel hurt, to kind of want to hurt in return. And that's not okay. That's not godly in any way, shape, or form. The Romans chapter 12 makes this same basic point. In verses 17 and on, it says, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. And we need to remember this because in part, our repayment, our judgment is never fully just, but God's always is. God is able to judge and is capable of judging and is just in his judgments always, all the time. And we are called here to trust God and his judgments and not take things into our own hands and try to revenge ourselves or make threats when other people insult or threaten us, but instead to entrust the judgments, the proper judgments, to God. I mentioned that George Whitefield had gone through some horrible things when he was sharing the gospel both here and in Europe. And he constantly had this line of saying, you know what, I'm content to leave the truth to be determined by the judge of all the world. In other words, he would be maligned and accused of things, and he wouldn't even respond. He wouldn't even defend himself. He would just say, you know what, the judge of all the world will make it right. The kind of person that I am will be determined at the final judgment. And I'm content to let God set the record straight. I don't need to defend myself. The people who know me, they know me. They've seen me. And lies, you know what? Lies are lies. They're worthless. And sometimes getting into the muck with other people, it never helps. And so we are to trust in God to avenge, and to God to protect, and to God to make right wrongs, and not seek to do it ourselves. Romans 12:21 is a verse that I think everyone should memorize. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. This is the point that when we're assaulted by others, don't go back at them. Trust, you know what? God's going to repay this wickedness and this sin. Either Jesus paid for it fully on the cross, which is enough for me, or they're going to pay for it in hell. Either way, what I want to do to them doesn't matter. It's insignificant. I'm going to trust that God is going to do what's right. That God will defend, that God will set the record straight. And I'm not going to get caught into playing in the mud with people who like to sling around lies and deception. But instead, I'm not going to be overcome by evil, but I'm going to overcome evil with good. Friends, let me encourage you. In a world where people love to lie, especially on social media and Facebook and other areas, people lie about all kinds of things. Know that, you know what? Living as a follower of Christ is going to come some negative attention. Trust God in it. You don't need to always defend yourself. You don't need to threaten other people. You don't need to retaliate. Just don't get overcome by evil. Overcome evil with good. Respond to hate with love and grace and forgiveness. For that's how our God has treated us. When we were yet sinners, he died for us. Let's not try to be Elishas and when we're mocked, praying that God sends some bears out of the woods. Let's be thankful that he has the power to do it. But let's leave the judgment. Let's leave the call to him. I hope you're doing well. Praying for you all. See you on Thursday.